Looking for insight, inspiration, and community? Tune in to Behind the Camouflage, the podcast made for Marine Corps spouses by Marine Corps spouses. We cover everything from navigating military life to finding joy in the journey. Subscribe now wherever you get your podcasts and stay connected with those who understand.
Hey Scuttlebutt listeners, thank you for joining us and your continued support. This week, we continue our Road to 250 segment, celebrating the Marine Corps' 250th birthday in 2025. Over the next year, we'll feature stories and history from throughout the 250 years of the Marine Corps. These episodes will be nested within the MCA's overall Road to 250 campaign, where you'll find featured articles in both the Gazette and Leatherneck highlighting events and battles within specific periods in Marine Corps history. The MCA also has a commemorative Road to 250 coin collection. These commemorative challenge coins can only be found through the MCA. Go to marineshop.net to order individual coins or email customer service at mca-marines.org to order the entire set or learn more. This month, we walked the Road to 250 with frequent guest and friend of the show, Sergeant Major Justin LeHew. Sergeant Major LeHew talks to us about how the World War II and Korean War period helped define the Marine Corps. Where we can't overstate the significance of the Marine Corps' amphibiosity during the island hopping campaign, we talk about how vision and innovation during the pre-war years and the employment of Marines during the Korean War, namely the amphibious landings at Incheon, may have done even more to solidify the Marine Corps as the amphibious force in readiness. This is episode 201. Hey Scuttlebutt listeners, thank you for joining us and your continued support. I am, and what did we say earlier? I am more than a jackass, Vic, and I'm here with Nancy.
Hey, Vic, how you doing?
How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm back from vacation. Yeah, just had a week's vacation. I'm feeling rested, refreshed.
Were you guys flying? Did you fly commercial or did you
No,
guys do your own flying?
We did our own. I sat in the back seat and I read a couple of fantastic books. We will be interviewing some of those authors in coming episodes. I've already got that in the works.
What was the distance you guys traveled?
We went, I don't know, but we flew from here in Northern Virginia up to Northern Wisconsin. We had to stretch it over a couple of days because I'm told that's a lot of flying.
Yeah, there was some crazy weather. Did you get that?
We did. We got weathered in. Where did I say we got? Canton, Ohio. We got weathered, and we also, for the first time in our 12 years of doing this, we had a little maintenance issue.
Oh, dang.
And we still don't know, possibly a bird strike that took off our rotating beacon off of the tail of the aircraft, which is very important. You got to have that light on to let people know you're there. And then we got weathered in there in Canton, and so.
Cool.
Spent an extra night there, but it was cool. It was cool traveling. It's a beautiful way to, it's like a combination of the Great American Road Trip, but also by air. So you just end up in the, and
without the TSA.
And no TSA and I'm
no
going to
first come, first serve seating.
Spoiler alert, bringing our guest into this conversation, Sergeant Major Justin LeHew. I was telling him earlier that we just dropped into this little town in Ohio yesterday, 2 days ago, Findlay, Ohio. And turns out he grew up, what'd you say, 10 miles from
about
Findlay?
19 miles from there.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
And it was just a great little town. You just drop in these little towns that you would not be stopping there. You would not drive there.
What in Findlay, Ohio necessitates, why would they what was the demand signal for an airport to be in
It's
Findlay?
the corporate headquarters for Marathon Petroleum.
Ah,
they had their own hangar at the airport. Just saying.
On. So it's not like, crop duster here and this.
No.
This is like really pinky finger out kind of flying.
Yeah. The other thing to look for is, so yesterday afternoon we stopped in Clarksburg, West Virginia. Huge, massive runway, towered airport, but there's one terminal and there was no commercial. It's like, what is this here for? Then you look across the field and you see West Virginia Air National Guard hangar. Like, aha. So you kind of sort of learn to look for those things. That's where you're going to find the services that you need. But it's also fun to land at one of these kind of podunk towns where there is nothing, and it's a couple of dudes in a small, it's called an FBO, fixed space operation. It's kind of like a couple dudes in a living room watching Bonanza reruns. And you show up and they're like, hey, you want to borrow the crew car? And they hand you some keys to this old jalopy, and you can drive somewhere in town and go get a
bite to eat or something.
Bite to eat. Yeah. It's really interesting to travel that way.
It makes me think of, I know you've seen it, The Right Stuff.
Yeah.
And those airfields out in like the Cali Desert or whatever, where they just had like a runway and then
Edwards, absolutely,
a bar that was also a grill, and then that's really it, right?
There is an airport. I mean, I don't mean to turn this into the aviation episode of Scuttlebutt, but there is an airport in Ohio that we have a tendency to stop in at as our first stop leaving Stafford, Virginia. It is in Carroll County, Ohio. Do you know Carroll County, Ohio? Because there is a restaurant on site, and so you can land, refuel your airplane, walk over into the restaurant, sit down, and get yourself 2 eggs, breakfast potatoes, toast.
It's just like Fredericksburg.
Yeah, like the Robin's Nest Cafe.
Like the Robin's Nest Cafe in Fredericksburg.
It's outstanding, and it's a fun way to travel.
A little piece of Americana.
It really is. Yeah. And the beauty of our countryside, since we're fresh off of Independence Day, I'm going to give my patriotic rant. This is an absolutely beautiful country we have.
Unbelievable.
And when you're at 3,500 feet instead of 35,000 feet, you can see that patchwork quilt of the Midwest. And then you can see when you cross over into the North Woods of Michigan and you see all the lakes. It's absolutely beautiful. It's really beautiful.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's kind of a neat community too, like you were saying. It's not just like the aviation. RVers have their own thing. And this is their style. The aviation community, that's a smaller aircraft. They're like that. They have their community as well too. Yeah. And then after years, because you and I have got to talk about it numerous times, of when you hop into those little areas, even when you just stay over a little bit, you meet these people along the way that you never would have met, flying the big commercial aircraft. And then that connection, once you make that connection, that's kind of in your mind for, that was a good stopover. Yeah. Next time we fly along this route, we're going to stop there.
Culturally, too, not just like that sense of community, but also there's not the, there's no, like, it's a much slower sort of, it's not the go, I'm only here because I have to get from point A to point B, and everybody else is sort of an obstacle.
I think it's still old America.
Yeah.
It's reflective of like the earlier days of air travel.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the opportunity to put a little money into a local community as opposed to, and no shade to chain restaurants or chain operations, but it is something to be able to continue to support local communities.
100%, yeah. So, I think that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Well, Sergeant Major, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me back.
So last time the three of us were together was for the evening parade, which was 3 weeks ago?
Yeah, I think so.
About 3 weeks ago. And we were talking a lot about that. So you were the keynote speaker, guest of honor for that. And I know your humility won't really allow you to sort of elevate yourself, but
so we're going to do it for you.
Yeah, but really amazing. Obviously, your work with History Flight, all the things we've talked about on this show. But I mean, can you just, I guess, can you give us some of your takeaways from it? Because I mean, this is my second time, because I don't have any problems putting myself on a pedestal. So I was invited. Oh, yeah. This is my second year in a row being invited to the evening parade. As per SOP, really. And
because you're Vic.
Yeah. And so really,
one name.
It every year, or the 2 years, it's so good. But this year was even more special because it was all NCO run. No officers, no staff NCOs in the formation. And you wouldn't, for a casual observer who maybe isn't paying attention to things, wouldn't have known the difference. But anyway, so what were some of your takeaways from that evening? I thought it was so good.
Well, I think one is it's probably one of the greatest honors of your life to have a group of people, also to be invited by the Sergeant Major of the Marine Corps and the U.S. Marine Corps as a whole, to not just be reflective of your 31 years or whatever as a Marine, to actually have it encompass a lot more than just the time that you wore the uniform, and highlighting to a lot of people continued service.
Yeah.
And hear people who are doing it out there. And when you see that, I think it's very reflective of that whole thing of, if you can see it, you can be it, and to have an all NCO parade, which you and I talked about, those are rare. And to watch all those young women out there, whether they're ushers, everybody is an NCO that is there. Like you said, a majority of the people, what the beautiful thing of that parade that's different than the one over at the evening parade on Friday nights that's inside, quote, like the Bastille, right?
Right.
Same kind of flavor, same kind of everything, is that the Marine Corps gets to take that and put it out in the public.
Yep.
And then just say, stop on by,
bring a lawn
roll
chair.
a lawn chair out, bring your dog, bring
Yeah.
anything, and you're more than welcome. And to be able to look around, and there were thousands of people sitting in standing room only on blankets with dogs and kids and that, to be able to watch those Marines and see the youthfulness of all of them and the level of responsibility.
Yeah.
Shepherded under the guys right before we're going into the 4th of July of that.
Yeah.
With the Washington Monument, the Iwo Jima Memorial at sunset, and putting all that together. There's a reason that we do that.
Well, I think too, one of the things, and I definitely want to get your take, because you said this was your first.
It was.
But one of the things too that I want to drive home that was really almost visceral for me, having spent the majority of my time in uniform during the Long War, is that these aren't Marines that are necessarily plucked out of recruit training, or they didn't join the Marine Corps to be part of 8th and I, to be part of the Silent Drill Team, and so this is their MOS, is a Silent Drill Team member. These are infantrymen who, after their tour is done here, will go back to a line unit.
Yes.
And so it makes me think about when we were in OIF and OEF, that a lot of these men and women who were doing these formations were coming out of country, doing this brief 2-3 year tour, and then going back to a Victor unit to start a workup. And if the balloon were to go up today, many of those Marines that we saw in that formation would be getting orders to a Victor unit to then deploy in response to.
They're also active Marine infantrymen that are responsible for the military district of Washington, D.C. So that means a lot of the things that you potentially see happening in Los Angeles and everything else, if that's happening within the confines of Washington, D.C., or Washington, D.C., like we were on 9/11, is under attack, those infantrymen will be on rooftops, streets, protecting city blocks, because they are an active component of the military defense system. They're not just put in Washington, D.C. to get dressed up in dress blue
for ceremonial purposes
and do a ceremonial purpose. They are an active
they have to maintain their ITSs from their TNR manual to maintain that proficiency, because when they do go back to a line unit, they're going to be expected to fall in.
Exactly right.
On whatever, machine gunner, mortarman, heavy machine gunner, whatever thing that they're supposed to be doing. So I always thought that it's like you said, it's not a ceremonial thing. It's wonderful, and it really is great for all of us to see and watch it. But it's all very easy to lose sight of the fact that these people are part of a team. These people are part of the cycle. They are only there.
Yes, they're there for a purpose,
and then they're going to go back and do their actual jobs, and that is whatever. Anyway, so what were some of your takes from the evening?
Well, first of all, a career journalist, I was so engrossed in the entire event. I didn't take any pictures. I mean, okay, that's hyperbole. I took 2 pictures. That was it. I just was, and imagine that, folks. I was living in the moment.
Crazy.
But I had my phone with me. I was ready to take pictures, but I was just amazed. It was a wonderful evening. It was so wonderful also to be one of your guests, and we got treated like VIPs, and that.
Yeah, I know, all sincerity. Thank you so much.
That was
so good.
Wonderful. We appreciate it. Thank you very much. And I told you in the pre-show, my husband, who is retired Air Force, and he, I've been here with Leatherneck for 18 years. And for the last 18 years, he has really delighted in kind of, giving me a little crap about the Marine Corps, friendly inter-service rivalry. And, anyway, after it was over, he turned and he looked at me and he said, well, thank you for inviting me to be your +1. This was absolutely amazing. And so I don't know of a better way to kind of sum up the evening. That the one thing he did say, his closest friend is a friend of his from Southcom, a retired Marine. He said, hey, you need to text Gary. Text Gary, tell him we're here.
Nice.
So that it was a wonderful evening. We thoroughly appreciate your including us.
Yeah.
But I do want to ask you, now that you've had a few weeks to reflect on that, what did that mean to you to be? And like Vic said, you're a humble person. You're not one to toot your own horn. But we've got you. We're recording you now. What did that mean to you? To be honored in that way,
to be able to stand out there, whether it was the Women's Memorial for the pre-serenade and a few other things, but to actually be able to tune out everything. It's almost like that movie with Kevin Costner for Love of the Game. Like you're a major league pitcher. There's 62,000 people in the stands. How do these guys go out there and just play catch with the catcher? The average person can't do that. And you hear people talk about combat like that too. How could you do certain things in combat? And when you explain things like things slowed down, you were able to tune out all the bangs, the whistles. People find it amazing when they ask about Nasiriyah, and I say, I personally can't remember seeing an aircraft in the sky, right? Until the helicopter landed that we brought in to evac casualties. But I talk to anybody else, and they can remember seeing the F-18s. They can remember seeing rotary wing aircraft. I couldn't, because you're in this zone. Mm-hmm. So when you are able to walk out there with your family, right, who it happened to be on the 127th birthday of the U.S. Navy's Hospital Corps as well, was that day.
So perfect.
And my wife was a U.S. Navy Fleet Marine Force Hospital Corpsman. So it was able to share that with her on what's her day as well as a whole family thing. But to be able to, for a moment, before anything starts, to be able to stare at the Marine Corps War Memorial in Washington, D.C., with your back to Arlington National Cemetery and your father is buried just on the other side of that thing. It's such a moment that there aren't enough words to adequately describe when you clear the mechanism and you see the Washington Monument, you see the Capitol, you see the War Memorial, and you see you're standing there on the 250th anniversary of the United States Marine Corps. For all of those things to come into an alignment for your life, I found that absolutely fascinating. And you've heard me say before, you're blessed to be where you're supposed to be at that moment in time. And to be able to then invite a lot of very close people that played their part in you being on that stage that day, it's just absolutely fantastic.
Yeah. When you put it that way, it's really getting a little verklempt here.
Yeah.
But it is it's such a testament to that it was the NCOs running it, that this idea that it's more than just legacy. I guess I'm having a little trouble putting it to words, but this idea that for you, I would imagine in particular, because not having not been enlisted, but having relied so much on the young generation of my time for the overall success of the unit was this idea. Like, and I think you talked a little bit about like family, of community, and it really, I thought it was a testament to see, you are standing next to the current Sergeant Major of the Marine Corps. You're a retired Sergeant Major. You've got your legacy within the annals of the Marine Corps, and then you're looking at the future coming up and doing and continuing to exceed expectations. I don't know.
And knowing very well, in all likelihood, not hyperbole, that there is one man that is standing out there that in 20 or 30 years is going to be standing where I'm standing, watching the same exact thing, which keeps the fluoride in the water and makes the Marine Corps the organization that it is.
It's awesome. So good. Because I'm like the master of segues as well. Being at the EWO Memorial, War Memorial, is so good because we are actually here to talk about, and you'd mentioned the Marine Corps 250. We are on the road to 250, and we are up on the World War II bucket time period, World War II in Korea, of Marine Corps history in our road to 250. And our first thought when we were thinking about who should we bring on, obviously, get in line for folks to talk about EWO, to talk about Tarawa, Guadalcanal, Okinawa, which, shameless plug, check out our video on our YouTube channel on Okinawa, and we'll have another one coming up for Incheon that are absolutely chef's kiss.
Yes.
These things are so good. But rather than just doing a deep dive on a particular battle or even the Island Hobbit campaign as a whole, we were like, well, what if we brought in JD to talk history flight? Like, that would be so cool. But then I was thinking at the same time, while we love to propel what we did during the Island Hopping campaign, we have to remember that, the Army did, a fairly decent job doing amphibious raids as well in Europe. And then just a few decades before that, although not awesome, we still had the Aussies and the Brits and the Kiwis
at Gallipoli
doing something we all So anyways, really long way of saying we wanted to bring you in. We couldn't really think of any better person to talk Marine Corps Amphibiosity and what it was about this time period that really helped define who we are as a service today. So, go.
Yeah, ready, set, go.
Well, that's something that's going to lead in. I would probably say it is a very good segue because the battles, not to take away from it, the battles are defined. You can pick up anything on Google. You can go to the library. You can see a clip. If you type in Saipan 1944, you're going to see a plethora of anything and information, small clips or anything about Saipan. Peleliu, Anvil, you can go all the way back and you can find. What you really can't find is the why.
Yeah.
You can always find short videos that are going to tell you the wave tops that involved MacArthur and Nimitz, and here was the 50,000 foot view of the Pacific on what they do. But why the Marines? Why the Navy? Why have why did we build so many cargo ships? Why did we start to do that? Why did the Japanese force people's hand in order for us to come up with this concept first? And most people that study this period know that these battles were being planned and fought a decade before they were actually had to be put into play. And you have a major theater of operation going on in Europe that the leaders that have come together numerous times in the world that are trying to piece the world according to who wants what to happen now compared to what needs to happen then. A lot of the decisions were made to focus on the fight in Europe first. Planes, tanks, machinery, everything that's going to help Churchill. We need to stop the tide of Nazism, right? And then we have 1941 and Pearl Harbor, right? Of which a lot of people say that nobody could see that coming. Right? There were people that saw that coming.
Yeah, what decades. Is it? Magic and Purple, right? With those the code breakers.
Absolutely, and even before the code breakers, you have people
who are reading the tea leaves.
That are reading the tea leaves. You know, the historic Major Pete Ellis, right?
Yeah.
And 2000 or whatever, finally his cremated remains makes it to Arlington National Cemetery. So the whole disappearance like Amelia Earhart of Pete Ellis is not. He's right over here, right? But the whole aura around this time period in the 1930s, that you have a Marine major of all people. Why should people listen to this guy? It's the same reason we send Evans Carlson out. Why do people listen to Evans Carlson? Well, the Marine Corps seemed to do this or recognize this faster than the other services, of taking these mid-grade officers and sending them to these very contentious regions. Because if you send a general there, everybody knows. Right. If you send a major there, nobody knows.
Yeah.
And you can go and observe, and you can report back what is happening that is influencing somewhat of the future that's coming. And as we all know...
Yeah, like a general officer can't just like mosey through the hallway without... people
even in that time period where it was a lot easier to disguise the movement of something, and it's almost impossible with the internet today, with the buzz to do that. Rapidly, the word is going to get out through spies, through locals, or anything else. There is an admiral or there is a general in our area out here, and he's not just here on vacation. That gets the attention of the enemy and their generals and admirals who have studied these people, and a lot of their admirals, like Yamamoto and everybody else, has actually studied in the United States. And actually, case file, I know Admiral Nimitz, I know Halsey, I know that when we were younger officers, we interacted with these. So they are actually planning a lot of this expansion. And during that time period, the Marine Corps, a decade before, had started to already, like Nancy said, see the tea leaves. You were talking the very young Krulaks of the day, the very young officers here at Quantico. We had talked earlier about Higgins boats, LVTs, and everything else, but people forget that we were testing amphibious tanks in the 1920s right here at Quantico. The Christie amphibious tank rolled right down there by that pond where HMX is at currently today. And we've got photos of it coming out of the water and the Marines cranking wrenches on it and trying to figure out in the 1920s the future that people were already seeing in the Marine Corps. And then you start to see the Japanese expansion. And we're not talking about so-and-so expanding from one country across the border to another country. You're talking expansion on places that we don't even have visibility of, and some of these places ain't even on maps, right? Where they are putting out in these shipping lanes. And they do this. And then on December 7th, we get struck.
Yeah.
And we all know one of the biggest targets was supposed to be the American flat tops. The American flat tops were not in Pearl Harbor that day, right? And then Admiral Yamamoto famously said, I believe all we have done is now awaken a sleeping giant.
Yeah.
And why did he say that? At that time, probably the Japanese military was more martially prepared for war than America was to fight anywhere. We were still using leftover equipment from World War I and the Banana Wars and people training on that. They kind of knew if we can't do something to just retard the expansion, he saw the industrial capability of the possibilities of what the United States could do in reaction compared to his own Japanese industry and what they could do. And then once that happened, that set the course for we're in it. And now we have to choose and to commit a force, multiple fighting forces, both the Army, the Navy, the Marines, the Coast Guard. We have to, United States Army Air Forces, because before that, they're all concentrated going to Europe. Now we're splitting this in two. And when you look at the expanse of the Pacific, there's not just get on this road and drive to the next thing. There's not this resupply route that we can pre-stage all this equipment like we do in Europe. Mm-hmm. We can pre-stage tank divisions in Europe to overwhelm the enemy on multiple levels. Aircraft, tanks, whole infantry divisions stacked behind infantry divisions.
Yeah, the biggest moving piece is just getting the personnel over there.
Just say go, and then make sure you have your supply lines in place in order to keep that forward movement going so it doesn't stall. It's the movement of Patton's Third Army and how rapidly they can start going is because they can get the gas and they can get the food and everything else faster than the enemy can cycle and react to that, which is why the Germans couldn't react a lot of the way that they did during their setup to the Normandy invasion, because they couldn't rapidly resupply and move those forces as fast as we could when we started building mulberry harbors and pushing. Nobody was coming back from Normandy. That wasn't, oh, this didn't work, get back on the ships, recock it. No. You're going forward, and we are going to push everything into Europe until this is over with. Right? There's no, you're going back to see your family or anything else.
No do-overs.
We're going. And we're going to stack from England across the channel, everything else, and we are just going to continue to push supplies. We're going to airdrop supplies. We're going to do whatever we can do to keep this forward movement going. That wasn't like that in the Pacific.
Right.
So it was a completely different set of challenges. And then you have you have one very big personality in the Pacific, who is General Douglas MacArthur. And General Douglas MacArthur don't agree with the battle plan originally that the United States wants to put forward, because his focus always has been the Philippines is the key. The key. So all this movement, all these actions and everything primarily needs to support the retaking of the Philippines. Then we will use that to go off of here. Planners get together. They decide we're going to do a two-pronged thing. And we're going to come down in the areas that the Japanese expansion did not manage to get just as far from Australia and New Zealand. And we can start pre-positioning supplies and everything else to start feeding north. And I don't think they knew what north was. North eventually is Japan. Mm-hmm. They know the end point, and we know the starting point. Now, how do we get here on this turtle's back? And one of the things that I believe that most people don't know about the island hopping campaign, because whether you have Guadalcanal, whether you have Bougainville, and you start from the south and you start working north, and you have Taraway and the Gilberts, and then you're going through the Solomons and Marshalls and everything else. Most people don't know, because these were every one of them were horrendous battles. Mm-hmm. They were horrendous. They were horrific. The casualties were horrific at Peleliu, at Saipan. It didn't matter where it was at. But they could have been even greater, because we chose islands that weren't as heavily defended. And that was part of the island hopping campaign, was to take something like where the Japanese were concentrated on Rabaul, the largest garrison in the south of the Japanese, or where they push. Well, we're not going to attack Rabaul. We're going to isolate Rabaul, and we're going to hop over that, and we're going to attack something else. We're going to attack New Britain or Vella Lavella or something like this, to secure enough land to get an airstrip and to also operate small naval combatant ships and refuel from, where it's constantly blitzkrieg in a different manner than happened in Europe. This is blitzkrieg on these little islands like the game Frogger, trying to get across to get to where it's at. And then enough to build airstrips and get closer and closer and closer. And then as we developed, because the island hopping campaign did not start until 1943 to 45. So Midway has already happened.
Midway was
major. Coral Sea has already happened. Midway, and that's Strike Back. The Macon Island raid has already happened with Carlson's raiders and everything, because the president wants to make it known that we are not just going to sit back. We have offensive capabilities, and we need the Japanese to know that. So we need these small little things and attack forces to get out and start hitting them. Like Pearl Harbor, once we caught all the Japanese flat tops at Midway, that took away their eyes and ears and strike capability probably for the remainder of the war. Right? Because they could no longer project sea power like they could from an island nation. While at the same time, we are outpacing the naval fleets to be able to cover this entire region. And Nimitz comes through and says, I'm going to take the central lanes. MacArthur, you're going to go with the Army, and you're going to take the western side through the Philippines areas to go through that. And then we're going to hop. And then we're going to have this two-pronged thing. And by the time that we get to this certain level of where you're back in the Philippines, and we're at this point right here, the United States of America has now produced such a long-range bomber that we don't have to take no more islands, because we now have a B-29 that has a 2,400-mile capacity to strike. And what a majority of people also, I believe, even historians, you don't hear them talking about. You hear Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and we dropped the bomb. We neutralized more targets and destroyed more people and cities than those two bombs collectively did together by the B-29 raids prior to those two events actually happening. So by the time that we're dropping bombs, we had reduced the fighting capacity of Japan in half. By the time that Truman's even making a decision to, do we need to invade Japan? And like you had said earlier, and you brought up Okinawa, Okinawa was the huge factor on people making a lot of these decisions, because as we start to get closer and closer to Japan, the main Japan, the resonating thing was the tremendous amount of Marine casualties and Army casualties and naval casualties, air casualties, loss of life it's going to do to take the Japanese homeland. Even after we have reduced them to this capacity, now we have this long-range bomber. Maybe we can do that without having to put all of these people and make mainland Japan 10 times worse than the Battle of Okinawa. And Okinawa, as you very well know, is vicious. That place, from Hacksaw Ridge and everything else, the Shuri Line, all of that, it is viciousness on an epic scale. Tara was vicious in its own way early on in the war. Peleliu's vicious in a completely different way than Harawa was. Iwo Jima's completely vicious in a different way, as pretty much everybody got to land almost unopposed. And then we're going to rain hell and everything else down upon you. So mass casualties after mass casualties. But the fanaticism in the Pacific was different than the fanaticism on the European continent. And we knew that the fanaticism in the Pacific had to get rooted out island after island after island. Because I believe the overall Japanese intent was this. If we can kill enough of them early on, America does not have the stomach to fight a long-term war. They will give up. They will pull back. We won't go to the west coast of America, but we have now gained all this land, right? And you're watching all of that happen with China now. In the same vast expanse area, with the lessons learned of the past, you're watching encroachment on smaller little islands that to you, me, and everybody else would just seem insignificant in the bigger part of thing.
But they're using, and this is a total segue, but
well, you just told us earlier you're the king of segues, so go for it.
Yeah, well, I guess this is,
and it does segue.
Yeah, but right this is a bit of we're diverting a little bit here, but to your point though, the lesson I think that has been learned is the viability of soft power, because they're not taking these places by force.
Correct.
Like they're not just showing up with a division's worth of troops and then setting up an airfield. They're basically creating bond servants from the local governments, which you experience firsthand.
Correct.
As you're trying to do.
And the other thing that you have is you have things like the Japanese had no way. Let's just go to Guadalcanal, right? At a time of Guadalcanal's happening, the Japanese still has a navy. And they're still able to fight the U.S. Navy in the slot and everything else, right? They're still able to fight things like Leyte Gulf. They're still able to put these things. And they still have relatively an Air Force. They have bombers and they have fighters that can maintain all of that. But when you take somebody like the island of Basio and Tarawa, those individuals were sent there to die for the emperor. There was no coming back. The Japanese plan was kill as many Americans as possible as you can. It's attrition warfare at its best. And you will die for the emperor. Your family will have chrysanthemums in heaven. Everything else, right? They had no way to resupply any of those garrisons that far away. So the island hopping campaign took that into account and said, the more we can isolate their ability to resupply garrisons out there, then the garrisons will starve themselves out of existence, and we will be able to roll over one after another, which is exactly what the plan was, and it played out in spades like that. It played out in spades. What you had just said is diplomacy on a different level of achieving a lot of the early on results without having to do that level of attacking and attrition warfare to commit your forces to. And like we had said, there was Pete Ellis back in the day, right? Pete gets his just due. I'm sure there were a few other ones that were just as smart, just as capable, but somehow Pete gets the light on him, right? Well, we have people like that today. And everybody's coming out of the woodwork now. You see online. I was telling people 10 years ago, okay, not at the micro level, man. You're speaking on a macro level of eventually the United States and China are going to have to face off. Okay, it doesn't take a genius to study that eventually. That's not if, it's when, right? It's just the way it is. But there is a young Canadian lady is out there that is, I think, it's like the Pete Ellis of this generation. Her name's Cleo Pascal, and she's from Canada. She lectures in D.C. a lot, and she has been telling people for decades at the micro level what is happening, what the plan is, what they are doing, what they are dredging, what they are getting, what the democracies that they are disrupting, how they're going in to support certain candidates to make it look like it is this, while at the time take the most capable ones and get rid of them, and let's get these puppet people into here, right? And then you get, and how does that intersect? You get things like a lot of my scientists that are out on Tarawa. We still have well over 300 men. Tarawa is still the largest known place that has the most consolidated MIAs in the world. Meaning, know where they're at. They're just not in a cemetery. They're in this 800 by 2 mile line thing. And there is still 300 of them scattered all over here. So wherever you dig here, you're going to hit something. You're going to do something. So that's happening out there, right? Well, when COVID and the pandemic happened, and everybody gets pulled back into basically a year of their life, whether you're from Spain, everybody goes home.
Yeah.
And the world just sits there. The Chinese did not just sit there. Reports, when we left certain areas, it's the internet. Islanders are telling you, well, you were gone about a week and these people showed up. Okay? And here's what they're bringing. And they're offloading supplies, and we have steak and meat, and they're fattening up the lambs for the slaughter. We're living good, right? And then you're sitting there going, if you look at a map, you're saying, how can people not see this? you're sitting here diplomacy-wise with your own nation going, how can people not see this? You're watching it happen. And then you throw it on a map because it's not the Solomons, or it's not the Philippines, or it's not a concentrated area that people have chosen in those op plans to say we will defend or we will attack here. And then you sit there and go, if you draw a line down this map where Tarawa is at, insignificant little spot of Earth out there, right? Not insignificant enough that the Marine Corps and the Navy chose it as one of the islands of the island hopping campaign, because the Gilbert Islands in Tarawa is the closest island chain to Hawaii and Guam. Right straight south, right straight due east, then there's Tarawa. That's why the Macon Island raid happens. That's why all of that. That's the chain out here. So you're sitting here going, in the absence of people pulling out, the Chinese has now moved in to the island chain that's closest to our largest buildup of the Navy in Guam now, and also the 1941 Hawaiian Islands, between those two. And they're out there, eyes and ears, listening stations, whatever. They're also dredging deep water ports.
Yeah.
They're also securing old landing strips that were abandoned by the military years ago.
Fishing lanes.
Start clearing them out on when you go from Bayshio all the way up to Macon at the top. And all those little turtle shells that make up the Kiribati Island chain. There were multiple little U.S. airfields in the 1940s after we secured that island and that area. Then by 1946 and 47, we have abandoned all of those, and we have consolidated in these other things. History's history. Well, if you could put an airfield on there once, you can put one on there in 2025. And if it's shrunk or it's smaller, we can dredge enough, like Dubai, and we can actually make something out here to launch as a platform. But we're not going to put, like you said, we're not going to put gunboats. We're not going to land an Su-27 or whatever, because that's like the admiral or the general showing up.
Yeah.
Then people are going to be like, whoa, what's going on? No, we're just going to buy up businesses, fix people's houses, and we're going to do all of that to whenever the time comes, because we now possess that and you don't. And by us possessing that, that is a deterrent. That's probably not a reverse island hopping campaign, but it's an early radar system. It is a deterrent. We know we're at and we have a foothold. And they have done that all from the first island chains all the way out. And they've done it in such a rapid manner that it's not just the focus of protecting Taiwan, which was Formosa, which was on the island hopping campaign. That was one of the biggest decision points eventually, was we wanted to attack Formosa and then launch, consolidate our forces on Formosa to attack Japan, right? Mm-hmm. And they said, we're not going to do that. We'll start positioning from the Philippines and other places to do this. History is just showing this going from the reverse side. The expansion through the Pacific is now coming the opposite way. And they're doing it in the manner that you had said. It's non-contentious. It's business contention. It's fighting in the IT space.
It's loans.
It's winning a battle. You know, you're already fighting this battle decades before you ever have to physically go force on force with somebody, because it allows you time. It allows you time to build. Yeah. And it allows you time to get capabilities, right? So if we are now placing people into these areas, once somebody has the capabilities to do that, you know, the root element of warfare that is never going to change is you cannot defend for a long time or secure a large, vast expanse without having human beings actually hold the ground. You can deter through IO. You can deter through drones. You can do everything else. But if you want that piece of property, eventually people have to hold that piece of property to get it. When people have to do that, the average Chinese, whether they are trained the same way, not the same way, or anything else, we overwhelmed the Japanese by sheer numbers. Supply numbers, both in planes, tanks, and resupplies, but in men and manpower. 18,000 Marines assaulted the island of Tarawa against 4,000 Japanese soldiers. we were going to win because we could push more supplies. The Japanese could not reinforce themselves. So you were just going to whittle away, keep hitting the anvil until they can't fight anymore, right? Well, last time I checked, the conscription rate or whatever in China is roughly about 20-1 odds against what the U.S. military can put as an attacking force compared to, let's just say, Chinese infantry.
Right.
So you're talking when you talk
home field advantage.
And when you talked about Korea and everything else, all of a sudden the Chinese crosses within the 30. It's a different war.
Yeah.
And when you're looking around and you're hearing trumpets and it's 40 degrees below zero, and you're like, these aren't North Koreans. Where did all these people come from? And they just kept coming, wave after wave after wave. That is still the battle plan of China, is wave after wave after wave. So even if we produce inferior equipment, if we can produce a ton of inferior equipment and throw it at you, it whittles down your superior equipment and also your ammunition, your will to fight, burn through your food, burn through your ability to do that, because our lives, we look at them more valuable. I just saw a thing today on the internet that says we just changed JJ Did Tie Buckle to JJ Did Tie Buck Lee now. Yeah, and there's an additional E. And the E is for empathy.
Yep.
Trust me, there is no empathy in the Chinese military.
Right.
Okay? There is a Chinese lieutenant with a bunch of Chinese whatever that are going to stack up at minimum 10-1 freaking odds to an air defense battalion or anybody else that goes out when the warring powers decide to go kinetic. Because we all know at that point, it's not a deterrent anymore when the two largest warring powers in the world decide to actually go kinetic against each other. That's where it's just going to continue to flood in. And we're not doing it on the European continent in those roadway systems and everything we talked about. We're doing it in the same things that the Marine Corps did in the 1940s. So it's like we talk about in the Banana Wars and everything. What were we doing in the Banana Wars? Well, we were testing aircraft in the Banana Wars. Mm-hmm. We were testing amphibiosity in the Banana Wars. We were testing things that were kind of in places that the world were insignificant to the world, but it wasn't insignificant to the Marine Corps, General Lejeune, General Butler, and a lot of these guys, because they were preparing for fights that people could not see past their hand in their face. They were hearing about the fights that were coming. This whole 1940s layout is preparing the blueprint and the fight for what the fights that are coming post-2025.
Especially we're talking Korea. So, again, like I think there's so much information out there, and I highly encourage all of our listeners to dive into sort of how how we got Amtrak, where that came from, what was the role of the Navy Marine Corps team, and how did that mature, and like you were saying, these things were being tested and sort of proof of concept operations here and there, and we were really getting into the innovation game because we were having to, as a smaller service, figure out what our role was going to be. But I guess my question to you is, we attribute much of what we, especially as Amtrackers, to what was going on during World War II. But when I look and see how at every phase, we're talking post-World War I, post-World War II, post-Korea, post-Vietnam, post-Desert Storm, Desert Shield, we're kind of facing a little bit of it now, there's always the question of, do we need a Marine Corps? And so where did the identity come from? Do you think this identity of being this amphibious force and readiness, did that come pre-World War II? Post-World War II? And the reason I even mention that, why it's doesn't seem to me to be so obvious that it was World War II, was because after they tried to do away with the Marine Corps and then we enter into Korea, it was Incheon. Mm-hmm. And the landings there, where even the Army had to acknowledge, if it wasn't for the amphibiosity of the Marine Corps, we would not have been able to do what we did in Korea. And then again, we see us become landlocked in Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
We see us obviously being landlocked in Somalia. Well, I guess the MEU comes in, but then completely turns into another land army. Then after Desert Shield, Desert Storm, the only real Amphibiosity was the Feint. Same thing with OIF, OEF. But yet we still hold on to this amphibious force and readiness thing. So where do you think that really sort of codified itself? Was it, as we would think in the island hopping campaign, was it Incheon? Or was it something that would, like, we already planted the seed and really those future campaigns were just fruits of the vine?
I don't know. And that's a great question because we've all kind of heard, well, if you grow up in the Marine Corps around that and anybody else, we've all kind of heard the thing where Secretary Forrestal stood at Iwo Jima on the deck of a ship and watched the raising of the flag on Iwo Jima and said famously, the raising of that flag on Iwo Jima secures the United States Marine Corps for the next 500 years, right? And why does he say that, right? He says that because the Marines executed a proof of concept, not just because 6 guys raised that flag and we won a battle. It was very visionary to see what that represented at the culmination almost of this island hopping thing of where we're going to win, and we're going to do this through these men. And these men and women have this medal behind them. That solidified, and that put when the world thinks of or sees or hears about a United States Marine, visions of all of that from that time period to here. They really, I hate to say it, unless they're in France, they don't think Belleau Wood. They don't think Chapultepec. They don't think they think Iwo Jima.
Yeah.
They think island hopping.
Yeah.
They think the blood shed, the casualties, but more than that, the grit of the individual person that says, we will not quit. And if you mess with America, they're going to keep coming at you when they get really serious about wanting to not be distracted by a bunch of other things. When they go all in, this is what they can do. And you hear that on the news today. People are always referring to, here's what the U.S. was capable of doing. Here's what they looked like in 1939. And by 1945, 6 years, they are the superpower of the world. That is it. Right? That's the first time America is looked at as a superpower. Mm-hmm. It's not Presley O'Bannon and Derna in 1805 of we need to be fearful of the Americans because this guy does this. That, when the study from Lend-Lease programs, when we've defeated the German wolf packs in the Atlantic with the help of our Commonwealth allies and everybody else, right? But the United States at these conferences was always the lead element. Franklin Delano Roosevelt was always the guy in the middle or the guy whatever, and this is what America wants to do, and here's how we're going to fit into the whole world concept. That was really the first time that the world viewed America is on the stage. They are mighty. They are here, which less than 5 years later, we then see what the Pusan perimeter freaking looks like, and we're right back to 1939 again, fighting with leftover World War II equipment, leftover tactics, because why? We won the war. And we're absolutely horrid in America at doing this. We're horrible at going to the Gulf War and saying, we just unseated Saddam Hussein. Cha-chink.
We're done.
We're done for now. And we're gonna shut down jungle warfare schools, or we're gonna do this because here's the here's the focus, here's the future. We are the desert warriors, right? Mm-hmm. Then that kind of rolls in 2001 all the way through to where you had made the point of that generation was definitely not known really for amphibiosity, right? That's known more for the mettle of the U.S. Marine,
right?
That came from Belleau Wood, that came from here. So the fighting tenacity in Fallujah, the fighting tenacity in Ramadi is not a coastal amphibia. We're not using Marines to attack Da Nang, right? We're using Marines to kill the enemy. We're using them to stabilize a destabilized area. we're also putting them into areas that other U.S. forces have been known to operate in those areas. But when this organization gets into those areas, the situation changes. Why is that? Why when the Sunni Triangle? Why when anything happens? Why is it when these guys show up, these exclusion areas are not exclusion areas anymore, and the Marines are attack, hit it, and whoa. Because before, it was kind of like, hey, if it's D1E or something, why don't we just go around that?
Yeah.
You know, we won't mess with that or we'll probe that. Okay, the Marines are in D1E now, okay? But it isn't just the Marines, not any greater than the Army. It's the battle plan of what we're using them for at that time is distinctly different than whatever was the plan that was being tried before.
And does that come from our Amphibiosity that was sort of forged in fire here in the island hopping campaign? Because like we talked about, I mean, D-Day wasn't a small endeavor.
No.
It wasn't a couple of boats that just happened to, seize upon an opportunity. It was very thoughtfully planned out. It was very well executed, and it broke the back of Nazi Germany. But yet, as soon as they got on land, they're like, Army's like done, and then they go back to doing Army things. So we never really had inter-service competition for this Amphibiosity. Was that by design? Did we happen to just seize upon opportunities? Is this something that was forged in fire and it was so ingrained now in the American psyche that none of the other services wanted to try to take upon?
That's a good question.
It is, and I honestly think it's this. The Marine Corps has a role and the Army has a role. Everybody does have their role. You're supposed to play your position to do that. The Marine Corps is known by name of its name, right in there, Marine. They are created as the amphibious choice. We were not. That goes back to seagoing Marines, right? That goes back to ships riggings. Marines serve a purpose. Yeah. That's exactly right. Here's the assaults. Here's that. The Marines had chosen, this is an element of warfare we're going to invest in, right? And they're going to invest in the methodologies, the technology, but more the strategic element of the why. This is, and we're going to choose to be that plug-in force. Yeah. The thing I really love about Big Brother Army is the fact it's not that they cannot do that. Most people don't know the Army had 10 times more Amtraks and LVTs in the Pacific
even
theater.
Currently, they have more amphibs than we do.
Than the Marine Corps has.
I didn't know that.
If you're talking, for every 100 Amtraks the Marine Corps had in World War II, the Army had 700. And they could do Saipan with Army entire divisions of LVTs to do that, right? That's a strategic hold, overwhelming and capacity deterrence that the Army can do. That's not the surgical precision.
Right.
It takes Marines to teach people to do that. It takes them to buy into that.
We have that mindset, right?
We have the mindset.
Because we know I have to go in light. I don't have the cube space. I don't have the weight.
And that was what I'm made for.
Yeah,
that's what I've trained for.
Right.
And the Marine Corps has always trained first to be a surgical force. It's the MU concept. It's I can go in 90 days. I can go into 45 days. I can go into here. If we're talking airfield search and seizure, I'm sure if I'm in the corner and I'm a Marine, I'm like, we can do that, right? But I'm going to tell you right now, if a Ranger commander from the Army's sitting in there, he's going to look at me and he's going to go, hey, man, why don't you let us do the airfield seizure? That's kind of what our thing is. And then you're going to be like, roger that. Because that then frees up this capacity again. Because we have like forces with like strike capabilities, but we also have these inherent learning patterns that make up those strike capabilities. You look back and could ask the Army the same question to the Rangers, right? That you just asked about the Marines. Where did the Ranger legacy get whatever? And they're going to say those boys that climbed Point du Hoc secured the Ranger legacy forever. They're not going to talk about Rogers Rangers or people shooting redcoats behind freaking trees or anything else they started. They're going to be like, this is what a Ranger, a definition when the world sees a Ranger, what do they see? They see Tom Hanks,
Yes.
captain's bars,
Yeah.
and they see that red triangle with a 2 on the back that says 2nd Ranger Battalion. And here's what they're capable of doing. They are the force of choice to do this. 6th Ranger Battalion, they are chosen to do the Cabanatuan raid, right? Because that's what Rangers do. That's in our backyard. That's the Philippines, right? Why not the Marines? Probably because here's a force of choice, force of action, and we're starting to learn at the same time we have 3 Raider battalions and we're trying to figure out what those are.
Right.
The Army's got established already training schools that are more formalized to do the strike capacities of what they're doing.
And they're not having to fight for their existence after every major conflict.
They seem to not have to. I think everybody does to an extent.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is, if you didn't have to fight for that, we wouldn't have had, the Pusan perimeter would not have looked like the Pusan perimeter in September of 1950, right? We would have showed up with overwhelming capacity, bravado. We were the guys that just won in World War II. We wouldn't have shown up with a leftover ragtag freaking force that looked like we thought we were never going to have to fight again.
Right.
And then redo this. And then we land in Vietnam in 1965, dragging packs across the beach from World War II. And we're still using LBVs and Vietnam equipment by the time we're going to Somalia, Desert Storm, and everything else.
Right.
And then we start to get the more modern equipment that we have now. So, yes, I believe the world, because whenever I teach around, I always say there's something unique, because people always tell you there's something different about it. I can tell, even out of uniform, that guy was a Marine. Just how they carry themselves, how they walk, how they talk, what their haircut, the way they interact with people. But to the world, we just bombed Iran. Very cool. B-2s. Yay. Hit that. Come on back. Okay? To the world, that was not shock, awe, and fear that just scared the rest of the world of, look what the United States, they know we're kind of capable to do that, right? Strategic, surgical insertion, choice of force is the Air Force. They can do this. Boom, right? Okay. We're not going to make these plutonium, or we'll try for a time to do what you tell us to do this, right? The world sees this, right? The world then sees what's going on in the positioning, or the Army's positioning it. You know, putting battalions back into Poland, or putting battalions where we strip things out, because that's a big Army to be able to do that. You see the Navy and where they are at in conjunction with their amphibious shipping and just their attack structure shipping to do that. They're nowhere near what they were 40 years ago, with just the amount of ships that are accessible to move these forces around the thing strategically to do that. And then you have the Marines. But what I teach is everyone in the world knows what a U.S. Marine is. Okay? Everybody in the world knows what a Ranger is. Everybody knows what a B-2 bomber is, right?
They do now.
Right.
Yes.
They do. But everybody in the world still thinks that the U.S. Marine Corps is a special forces arm of the U.S. military as a whole, like 200,000 or 100, whatever we're sitting at. And they know this because when America sends her Marines, pay attention, she's serious. Mm-hmm. Because when that kid comes off that landing craft or something and stands on a piece of ground with a band, there is a reason there were Marines that were just sent to quell disturbances. Whether people want to understand that or not, there's probably a reason somebody said, hey, the Marines did that in like 92 or something, didn't they? Well, why don't we just send those guys back to do that kind of thing? Oh, that's right. Because they were the force of choice to guard the U.S. mail back in right from the Quantico station over here too, right? So the Marines chose from the Lejeune and the Butlers to invest in these surgical things that says we are the force of choice. Then we go to over 500,000 in 6 Marine divisions with that attitude. And then that attitude solidifies what you went to boot camp, I went to all that for. We, that USMC and all that, you can't look anywhere and not feel this obligation of not on my watch. We don't quit. We don't fail. It's just not going to happen because we have this legacy. And that is put into you by your OCS instructors, everybody. There is a legacy. That legacy is a force multiplier, right? To where you can put 10 Marines on the battlefield, and trust me, those 10 Marines, you can tell them they're going to take on 500 people, right? You are not going to get a single one of those Marines to go, I'm out of here.
Yeah, right.
And it doesn't matter what their MOS is. That is the beauty in the Marine Corps. Not the belief of every Marine is a rifleman. They all learn, they all play. But every time you go anywhere and you ask somebody what they were, I'm a Marine, right? Any of the other ones are, what were you? I was a Ranger. I'm a soldier.
Right.
I was a Ranger, or I was a truck driver.
Tanker.
What were you in the
Pilot.
Air Force? They don't tell you they're an airman.
Yeah, I know.
And we had generals, the beauty, me and General Lukeman and I up here, when Lieutenant General Walsh was over at McCittick, we had a Army 2-star general called Bob Scales come here. Wrote a book, Scales on War, Logistician, all this stuff. And at first, everybody's like, why is everybody here listening? Like you would do, right? Why are we here listening to a retired Army 2-star, right? We have this, we have this, we have this. And a lot of it was about the way we were making Marines. And he was the first one to go like, hey, why don't you just try this out? And you could see everybody, no. Why? Why not do that? Well, the answer was, because why mess with an RNG product if you take out one of the herbs and spices from KFC, it ain't KFC anymore.
Yeah, it's not the original recipe.
Right?
Yeah.
We know what the recipe is
11.
that makes the person what it is that they are. Even then, he said, well, now that nobody's shooting at you, why don't you just try it? Let's see what that is. And the unwillingness at the time to just go like, we're not going to do that. Okay? But the best thing was when some of those generals showed up to actually sit down. That was value added when he came to do that. A lot of good news, a lot of good things. There was changes from those conversations, whether people are going to say it at the table or not.
Right.
When you go back into the thing, yeah, why don't we try this? Or why don't we do a little bit of this? But I will tell you, when we would get generals and admirals coming to Quantico or get called to the Pentagon, and the conversation in the room was, we want to know why Marines identify as being Marines, but my soldiers don't identify as being soldiers. In World War II, they all called themselves dog-faced GIs. My dad was a GI. And that was a badge of honor. I was government issue. I'm a GI. He said somewhere along the line, we in the Army started to identify more with patches and tabs,
branch,
right, than the overall
more
concept.
tribal.
More tribal, exactly. And that is a lot of the reason that I think that the Marine Corps can still pull off what it is and still is looked at the way that we are looked at. That harkens back to your original question on that of where did we kind of start that from, where's it at today, and why do people still look at us as being the amphibious choice is because you have a proven product with a proven track record of success. Yeah. Right. It's the same thing you hear.
And it's the gnarliest thing you can do.
Right. And it's also you hear me talk about like with how is History Flight able to recover lost MIAs that couldn't be recovered decades before. It's not that couldn't have been done. The resources are different. The technology is different. But the team that you build, right, makes a huge difference. And then when you take all those resources that we talk about surgical, and you start to say, this was at this percentage rate of return on investment a decade ago. This is now a 93% success rate on whenever these guys go to the field of what they bring out of there. You apply that in a larger thing to the U.S. Marine Corps and overlay that. Because that same success rate, America looks at Marines as that's a 93%. That's an unbalanced success rate of every situation we ever put these guys into that provides a greatest return on investment. Because why, Vic? What are we known for? Doing more with less, taking the gear or the money or the situation we have, and we'll bitch about it all day. But at the end of the day, while we're bitching, we are turning that into gold. And we're not looking and wasting time and resources walking around with our pockets open and our hand out going here. No, no, no.
You're making it work.
We make it work. And we go into the training of that right from our young officers to go down to a unit level and go, here's your tools, here's your equipment. That's all you're getting. Figure it out, Lieutenant.
Yeah.
Right? Come back to me with a solution. Right? It's not one solution. That's what I always loved about what we do with lieutenants. There's never just one solution. It is, come back to me with what we just said. If I'm an IOC captain or anything else, come back to me before you put that in execution and tell me how you came up with that. That's unique what you did here. Boom, 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 boom. And what is that? Normally, that's option A, because I already have option B and I already have option C if I can't utilize this before I ever commit my platoon, my squad, or anything else. It goes back to the 2 is 1 and 1 is none. I'm not going in with this solo thing and doing that. I already know if we go to breach that door and that door doesn't breach, I'm not just going to have a breach team standing there going, my God, hey, Lieutenant, the door didn't open up, right? That doesn't happen with Marines. And the Marines also, not like a dumb bull. They're not just going to keep doing the same thing over and over again that's not working. On the move, more than anybody, they adapt, and it's almost like the Terminator or something. It's beautiful when you watch a young team of a squad or a fire team or a tank group, anybody, watch them in their element, and they're posed with the mission. Here's what you're charged to do. They already know the end result. They already know surrender is not an option. They already know, here's my resources I have. Here's the time frame I have. We learn that in Amphibiosity, right? There's a reason that you're Charlie on time and you start yell out grid positions because you're coordinating with naval gunfire and other landing things, and you need to land here on time because we're going to turn the barrage off 30 seconds before your hatches are going to start to come open, right? Before that, if you're early, you're going to be in the zone to get shelled. If you're late, you're going to get wiped out by machine gun fire, because when they crawl out of their hole like they did then, and you think they're all dead, you're going to find out they're not dead. So it's very precise and precision. Our amphibiosity of learning that decade after decade after decade only makes it so that when we layer all that decade after decade, it just makes us stronger and stronger and stronger. And sometimes it may look like we're recreating the wheel, and we didn't learn the lesson from the thing before, but it allows us to hit that wall, to learn that lesson, to somebody to show up and go, hey, remember that Marine Corps Center for Lessons Learned? Didn't we have things called Montagnards in Vietnam that used to be MTTs and IA? We just call them a different name now. Okay, somebody eventually comes along in the Marine world and goes, this isn't the first time we've ever done that. And a lot of times you just don't know that.
If you're reading Leatherneck magazine, you do.
Oh, you do? Well done. Well done.
I couldn't help it. No, seriously, we could call this episode Everything Old is New Again. And the first conversation that you and I ever had, we talked about this. You touched on this, that if we're not learning from history, we're just going to keep on doing the same thing over and over and over again. If we're not reading the tea leaves again, if we're not learning from the lessons of the past.
Mm-hmm. And that's why that's important. The hip pocket class that everybody doesn't think is important on the jump seat of the 80 for 5 minutes that day. There is a reason that why every one of the rooms that I ever had with any Marines above the rank of corporals, since I was a corporal, there was a citation in everybody's room. Didn't matter. Corpsman, it could be anybody. Usually it related, if that was a room of Lance Corporals, you'd find a citation from Vietnam. It shows a Lance Corporal. Here's what somebody did before you. It wasn't so much to put that person up and say, look at me or look at this. It was to show a heritage of when you are poised with these insurmountable challenges. And that's what citations are. Citations that got medals with V's and everything else are on this day with this training. this person did this. And to a lot of other people that looked around, that was different than what other people were doing. And that normally was something that was not to the book taught what that guy just had to do. You know, it's the same thing on like Saving Private Ryan when they make sticky bombs on the tanks. Right. Sir, sticky bomb? Yeah, it's this.
A bomb that sticks.
It's a bomb that sticks. Don't overanalyze this. Yeah. Do this, slap it on there, and do that. And I will tell you, where your jaw hits the deck is the first time it works. You're like, yay! And then less than 20 seconds later, a guy goes up there to do it and his entire body blows in half because the fuse went off before he could even throw it up there. Because there's the risk factor that the soldier knew. The mission is stop that tank. This is what we have. Figure it out. And everybody knew this is kind of really dangerous, right? Or else we would have learned this at Fort Benning. Right. No. This is the first time anybody's ever done this. You're the guinea pigs. Go. And you're watching this happen. Yay. And at the same time, the captain is watching the same kid get blown to smithereens, executing the task that he just told him to do. Why? Because that kid believed in that captain. Yeah. And we create men and women like that greater than anywhere else in the world that responds to that kind of leadership, that kind of action, and also takes charge where other countries do not. And in the amphibian campaigns, that's what you saw in spades. There is only one lieutenant. There is only one tech sergeant or something like this. There's not even the rank of E3 they're PFCs and privates. Then it's a corporal, it's a sergeant, very few of these. But all of a sudden, within seconds, the lieutenant's gone, the tech sergeant's head just blew up, everything else. What did these kids do? Next man up. Why? Because the Marine Corps trains that right from the first day they show up at recruit training. Yeah. The next failure rate. If you go to failure, and when he fails, you're the next guy in the breach. This assault does not stop because your buddy just got killed. Mentally take a snapshot, grieve later, accomplish what you have to do. There'll be time for that. Push through, push through, push through. The world knows that.
And I think that's where we see the significance of this time period. Is for the first time in Marine Corps history up to this point, it's on the world stage. And so I think that's what EUO, with the most recreated image in history, right?
I think so.
Is that it showed exactly what you said about the Marine Corps. But it's not just a cool thing, it's not a secret handshake amongst.
Correct.
It's on the world stage, and now it has become synonymous with all of those virtues that you talked about, that the world international, that the global community recognizes about the U.S. Marine. So, well, Sergeant Major, thank you so much
for
pleasure. Coming in. It's like a massive topic, and but I think we did it, right?
Yeah,
we nailed it.
Yeah.
Fucking A.
Yeah, you had to do one of them.
Yes.
It wouldn't be a cash. You have to do it once.
So, well, thank you again so much for spending some time with us, talking about this. I just love to get your feedback on sort of the larger thing, rather than just doing deep dives into, battle studies, which Marine Corps Association has on our website that are fantastic, but to really talk about the what are its effects and what is the why, as you mentioned.
And the legacy.
Legacy, what that means, and what folks today can take from it. So thank you again.
Keep doing great things.
Thanks for coming in.
Back on. We'll come up with some reason for you to come back. All right. Scuttlebutt is a production of the Marine Corps Association. You have heard the voices or contributions from Major Vic Rubel, USMC retired, Nancy Lichman, William Truding, and our guest. Ty Frazier is the editor, sound engineer, and technical producer. The Marine Corps Association is not an agency of the U.S. government. The opinions expressed in this episode are the personal views of the participants and do not reflect the official position of the United States Marine Corps, the Department of Defense, or the Marine Corps Association.